The morning betrayal came without warning. Daniel woke before the alarm, the room still dark, the air heavy and quiet. His phone vibrated once on the nightstand. He almost ignored it. Nothing good ever came that early. When he picked it up, the message burned into his eyes. It was from Evan, his oldest friend, the man he trusted more than anyone outside his family. The words were short, careful, and cold. The company accounts were under review. Funds were missing. Daniel's name was connected. Evan said he was sorry it had come to this. Daniel sat up, heart racing, reading the message again and again. His mind refused to accept it. This had to be a mistake. He had built the business side by side with Evan. They had shared risks, wins, late nights, and promises. If something was wrong, Evan would have come to him first. He always did. Or at least he used to. Beside him, his wife Mara slept peacefully, unaware that their life was breaking open. Daniel looked at her, then back at the phone. His hands began to shake. He searched for more messages, missed calls, anything that explained this. There was nothing. Just silence after the damage was done. By sunrise, the truth began to form. The missing money, the forged approvals, the way Daniel's access had been used. Evan hadn't made a mistake. He had made a choice. Daniel dressed without noise and went into the kitchen. The house felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. He poured coffee he didn't drink and stared out the window. His thoughts moved fast, crashing into each other. Anger came first, sharp and sudden, then disbelief. Then a deep, hollow ache. He remembered the day he met Evan. Two young men with nothing but ideas and trust. Evan had laughed easily back then, spoke about loyalty like it was law. Daniel had believed him without question. That belief now felt like a weakness. At 9 sharp, Daniel's phone rang. The company number, he already knew what they would say. The voice on the line was polite, distant, trained to sound fair. There were concerns, an investigation. He was asked to take temporary leave while things were reviewed. No accusations, but no support either. The call ended quickly. Daniel stood there staring at the wall, feeling something inside him harden. His reputation, built over years, was now fragile. A story was forming without him. Evan had moved first, and he had done it well. When Mara woke, Daniel told her everything, kept his voice steady, choosing facts over feelings. Her face changed with every sentence. Shock turned to fear, then anger. She asked the question Daniel couldn't stop asking himself. Why would Evan do this? Daniel had no answer. Not yet. The day moved fast. Emails arrived. Meetings were canceled. Friends from work stopped replying. It was as if a switch had been flipped. By afternoon, Daniel felt cut off from the world he knew. Only one thing stayed clear in his mind. Evan had planned this, and planning meant intent. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, replaying memories, searching for signs he had missed. Small things stood out now. Evan asking more questions than usual. Evan handling certain approvals alone. Evan insisting Daniel take time off last month. What Daniel had seen, as trust was now control. The sense of betrayal cut deep because it was quiet. There had been no fight, no warning. Evan hadn't pushed him out. He had stepped over him. By morning, Daniel knew this was not just about money or work. It was personal. Evan had used Daniel's good name as a shield. He had assumed Daniel would fall softly. That assumption hurt more than the lie. Daniel went back through old files, not with purpose yet, just instinct. He found copies Evan must have forgotten, old logs, backup drives. Proof that told a different story. Each discovery hit him like a spark. The truth was there. Caven's trail was careless, rushed by fear. As the evidence grew, so did Daniel's anger. But something else grew too. A dangerous sense of focus. He stopped feeling lost, began to feel-driven. He imagined Evan sitting in his office, calm, convincing others of his innocence. Daniel pictured the moment Evan decided to sacrifice him. That moment became a fire in his chest. Still, doubt lingered. Daniel wondered if Evan had been desperate. Fear had pushed him into betrayal. That thought didn't excuse anything, but it made the wound more complex. This wasn't a stranger. This was someone who knew him deeply and chose to hurt him anyway. By the third day, Daniel's name was being whispered. He could feel it, the looks when he went out, the way conversations stopped when he entered a room. Trust, once broken, spreads damage far beyond the truth. Daniel didn't confront Evan, not yet. He wanted to understand everything first. Revenge, he realized, required patience. And patience required control. At night, he stood alone in the backyard, listening to the quiet. He thought about justice, about clearing his name, about exposing Evan. He also thought about how far he was willing to go. The line between fixing the wrong and becoming something else felt thin. The betrayal had changed him. He felt it in the way he spoke less, watched more. The world no longer felt safe. Loyalty no longer felt certain. As the first part of his plan formed in his mind, Daniel made a promise to himself. Evan would not walk away untouched. But how that would happen and what it would cost was a question he had not yet answered. The desire for revenge was no longer just anger. It was purpose. And once that took hold, there was no going back. Daniel's life had narrowed to a single focus, understanding exactly what Evan had done and how to respond. Days blended into nights as he sifted through emails, spreadsheets, and old project files. Every detail mattered. Every forgotten attachment, every backup copy, every timestamp was a piece of the puzzle. He worked in silence, alone in the dim glow of his office, Mara occasionally checking in with a soft knock, but he barely noticed. Betrayal had created a tunnel, and he was moving fast through it. With each discovery, the picture became clearer. Evan had acted carefully at first. Small transfers, subtle adjustments, nothing to draw attention. But as pressure mounted at the company, his actions became bolder. He had assumed Daniel would never notice that his trust could be manipulated. It wasn't just about money. It was control, proving who had the power in a relationship that had once been equal. Daniel felt that control slipping through his own. Fingers and anger bubbled beneath the surface. Daniel started mapping Evan's moves. He noted the emails that had been deleted, the approvals that had been forged, the small lies told to colleagues to deflect attention. Each piece was a revelation, each one a silent accusation. He imagined Evan in his office, smirking, believing he had outsmarted him. That thought fueled Daniel, a slow-burning heat behind his careful, deliberate actions. Yet even as anger sharpened his focus, a quieter, more complicated feeling emerged. Daniel began to understand Evan's motives. Debt, pressure from outside, forces, fear of failure. Evan had panicked. The betrayal was a choice, yes, but it was also born of desperation. That knowledge didn't excuse the actions, but it complicated Daniel's emotions. The man he wanted to destroy was not just a villain, he was someone broken in ways Daniel had not anticipated as he reviewed the files. Daniel created mental scenarios. What would happen if he exposed Evan completely? He could ruin him professionally, perhaps even legally. Daniel could feel the satisfaction in his imagination that cold rush of justice served. But alongside that, he imagined Evan's family, friends, the collateral damage. The thought of causing pain to innocents made the idea less sweet. For the first time, Daniel questioned whether revenge would truly bring relief, or just perpetuate the cycle of hurt. Work continued without him. His suspension was still in effect, and the office felt like a different world now. Former allies kept their distance. Colleagues glanced sideways. Whispers followed him down hallways. Daniel's isolation mirrored his growing obsession. He had become both detective and judge, watching every detail, imagining every outcome, weighing each step. His world had become strategy and calculation at home. Mara noticed the change in him. He was quieter, distant, always thinking. She asked questions, soft, caring questions, but Daniel couldn't answer fully. He told her he was focused on sorting out what had happened, that he needed time to process. She nodded, concern etched on her face, sensing the storm inside him but unable to reach it. Daniel appreciated her presence but couldn't let anyone into this corner yet. It was his alone. Daniel's nights were long. Sleep came in short fragments, dreams crowded with Evan's face, his calm smile, the betrayal embedded in every interaction they had shared. He imagined confronting him, imagined the arguments, the shame, the regret. He imagined the satisfaction of finally being proven right. But he also imagined feeling hollow afterward, wondering if the cost was worth it. The mind is clever in warning and temptation at once, and Daniel felt the tug of both. He began rehearsing quietly. In his mind, he walked through the confrontation, step by step. Words he would say, evidence he would reveal, pauses that would land the impact. He considered, timing carefully. The goal was not just exposure, but maximum effect. Yet with each rehearsal, he also imagined Evan's defense, his explanations, the way he might twist truth to protect himself. Daniel had to account for that too. Every plan needed flexibility. Every decision carried consequences. But even as the plan solidified, Daniel found himself wrestling with another battle, morality. He knew that revenge could feel good in the moment, but he had seen it destroy people before. Friends who had chosen rage over reason had lost everything. He questioned whether he wanted that for himself. Could he stop before crossing a line? Could he claim victory without becoming the same kind of person who had betrayed him? Those questions haunted him, creeping in between files and calculations, making the process slower, heavier, yet sharper. Despite the moral weight, Daniel's focus never wavered. He began to gather everything he might need: printouts, emails, financial reports, everything that would make the case undeniable. He made copies, backups, kept them hidden in case anything went wrong. He was meticulous, precise, like a craftsman, shaping a fragile sculpture. Any mistake could undo months of preparation and leave him vulnerable. As the days passed, Daniel also observed Evan from a distance. He watched his old friend at the company, seeing the careful ways he managed interactions. The polite smiles that now felt like masks, the subtle attempts to shift blame elsewhere. Daniel noted each gesture, each lie in plain sight, cataloging it for later. He realized Evan was clever, but not infallible. Panic had made him sloppy. That gave Daniel a sliver of hope, a thread he could pull when the time came. Daniel's emotions became a tightrope walk. Part of him burned with the desire to act immediately, to strike while the wound was fresh. Another part reminded him to wait, to measure, to calculate, to make sure nothing was left to chance. Impatience warred with discipline, fury warred with reason. The struggle consumed him, shaping his every thought, every action. Every breath, in quiet moments, he reflected on their past friendship. College nights, shared ambitions, trust, loyalty, laughter, they were all there, ghosts hovering over the present. Those memories were painful because they reminded him what had been lost. And yet they also fueled his plan. The deeper the betrayal, the greater the need to respond to restore balance, to regain the control that had been stolen. Daniel also imagined Evan's perspective. He pictured the fear, the rationalizations, the small lies that had seemed necessary at the time. It was clear that Evan felt justified in some ways, that he believed he was protecting himself. Understanding this didn't lessen Daniel's anger, but it gave him insight. To defeat someone, he needed to know them completely, to predict their moves, to anticipate their defenses. Knowledge was power, and Daniel amassed it like a weapon. Time moved faster than Daniel expected. Weeks passed, each day a careful mixture of observation, research, and mental rehearsal. The weight of the betrayal never lifted, but the chaos in his mind became structure. He was no longer a man caught off guard. He was a man preparing, planning, shaping the moment when balance could be restored. The psychological toll was heavy. Sleep came reluctantly. Meals were forgotten. Conversations with Mara were brief and polite, but she noticed the tension, the lines forming on his face. The way his eyes always searched for something unseen. She asked if he needed help, if he was okay. Daniel nodded, smiled, but said nothing. This was a battle he had to fight alone. Yet despite the tension, Daniel's resolve was clear. He did not want blind revenge. He did not want destruction for its own sake. He wanted fairness, exposure. Evan needed to understand the consequences of his actions, not just face humiliation. And Daniel needed to know that he had acted with intention, not impulse. That distinction became his guiding principle. As the final pieces fell into place, Daniel realized he had changed. The betrayal had shaped him into someone more vigilant, more deliberate, more aware of the fragility of trust. He had glimpsed the dark possibilities in himself and chosen to channel them into preparation rather than recklessness. That awareness was both a burden and a gift. On the eve of confrontation, Daniel paused to consider what lay ahead. He could strike and satisfy a primal urge, or he could act with control and achieve a different kind of victory, one that proved his strength, intelligence, and restraint. The choice was clear in theory, but the execution remained uncertain. Emotions had a way of disrupting even the best-laid plans. Daniel went to bed that night with a restless mind, replaying every step, anticipating every reaction, and imagining every outcome. The weight of revenge, carefully cultivated, pressed on him like a storm about to break. He had become a man divided, driven by anger, tempered by conscience, ready for the moment that would decide not just Evan's fate, but his own. The morning would come soon, and with it, the test of all he had prepared. The moment where theory met reality, where the careful planning, the moral calculations, the emotional turmoil would collide. Daniel was ready, or as ready as any man could be when the line between justice and vengeance blurred so completely. The betrayal had brought him to this point. The desire for revenge had grown into purpose. The stage was set, and soon everything would change. The day of reckoning arrived quietly, almost deceptively. Daniel woke early. The sky a soft gray outside his window. The world ordinary, yet his mind was a storm. He dressed with precision, choosing the clothes that would give him confidence. Without arrogance, his laptop sat on the kitchen table, open to the evidence he had meticulously gathered over weeks. Emails, spreadsheets, transaction logs, messages, everything was organized. Everything was ready. Every detail was calculated to land the impact with perfect clarity. He paused before touching it, hands hovering. This was the moment he had imagined countless times, rehearsed word for word, slide by slide. The confrontation could destroy Evans' career entirely. It could expose the lies, the manipulations, and the betrayal in front of everyone. Daniel's heart beat faster at the thought, a mix of fear, anger, and exhilaration. He imagined Evan's face when the truth hit, the slow dawning of shock, disbelief, and then guilt. The idea brought a spark of satisfaction, yet beneath it, a heavy tension began to grow. Daniel stepped outside for a moment, letting the crisp morning air fill his lungs. He thought about Mara, who had stayed away from the company drama as much as possible, supporting him quietly at home. He thought about how far he had come from shock and betrayal to a meticulous plan ready to unfold. Yet even in these reflections, a new awareness emerged. Revenge, he realized, was not a simple path. Could satisfy in the moment, but the aftermath was unpredictable. Every action carried consequences that would ripple far beyond the immediate confrontation. When he arrived at the office, the environment felt charged. Evan was already there, calm as always, moving through the routine with a practiced ease that belied the tension in Daniel's mind. He watched his former friend from a distance, noting the subtle gestures. The way Evan adjusted his tie, the careful smile, the steady hands. Even now, Evan was controlling the narrative, shaping how he appeared to others. Just as he had always done, Daniel entered the conference room early. The space stark and professional, the long table reflecting. The ceiling lights like a blade. He placed his laptop at the head of the table, its screen glowing with evidence that could end everything. The documents were organized to build the story logically. A timeline of misdeeds, proof of manipulation. Consistencies tied to Evans. Actions, every line of data had been double-checked, every cross-reference verified. There was no room for error. Evan entered quietly, as if sensing the tension without needing explanation. He nodded politely. For a moment, they studied each other in silence. Years of friendship, trust, and shared history hung between them, heavy and impossible to ignore. Daniel's mind raced, imagining the words he could say, the shock he could deliver, the triumph of seeing the truth finally recognized. But at the same time, he felt something unfamiliar. Hesitation. The first words came from Evan. "Daniel, I know this looks bad, but it's not what you think," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, carrying the weight of someone attempting to justify himself. Daniel felt a pang of recognition. This was the same Evan who had once comforted him in moments of doubt, who had been his partner in so many ventures. The man was still there, hiding behind excuses. But still present, Daniel opened his mouth to respond, to lay out the full evidence, to deliver the reckoning he had envisioned. He imagined the reactions of colleagues, the ripple of shock, the end of Evan's control. It was intoxicating. Yet as he looked at Evan's face, he saw more than guilt. He saw fear, panic, and an awareness that his actions had consequences beyond what he had anticipated. He saw the human cost of complete exposure. He paused. His hand hovered over the trackpad, ready to begin the digital cascade that would end everything. For the first time, he felt the weight of choice fully. Revenge promised clarity, satisfaction, control, but it also promised destruction of a person who had once been indispensable to him. Of the fragile trust that could no longer be rebuilt, of the lives tied to Evan's actions. Daniel realized that acting in anger would solve nothing, would satisfy a moment but could haunt him forever. Instead, he took a deep breath and closed the laptop. Silence fell over the room. Evan blinked in surprise, unprepared for restraint. Daniel spoke instead, deliberately, calmly, with precision. He outlined the issues, presented the facts without embellishment, without accusation. He focused on shared responsibility, on processes that needed review, on clarity rather than judgment. The room leaned in, attentive, aware that the story was unfolding honestly without theatrics, without the need for spectacle. Questions were asked, clarifications were made. The company executives listened, taking notes, probing for understanding. Daniel guided the conversation with careful intent, ensuring that truth was revealed without unnecessary harm. He watched Evan, who shifted in his seat, tension building but tempered by the controlled presentation. Evan's defenses were anticipated, his rationalizations noted, and Daniel allowed them space without allowing them to dominate. After the meeting, Daniel walked the hallway alone, feeling the residual energy of the confrontation. He was both relieved and uncertain. He had not executed the revenge he had imagined, yet he had achieved something different, perhaps more important. He had asserted his truth without sacrificing his integrity. The evidence was still available, ready if the situation demanded it, but he had chosen not to weaponize it fully. The control had shifted, but it had not been wielded as a weapon of destruction. Later, Evan approached him quietly. "Why didn't you?" he asked, voice low, unsure, almost pleading. Daniel looked at him steadily. "'Cause I don't want my life built on ruining yours," he said. There was no bitterness, only measured calm. The words hung in the air, heavier than any accusation could have been. They carried the weight of moral choice, of power restrained, of justice shaped by conscience rather than emotion. The weeks that followed were slow, deliberate. Investigations proceeded. The company implemented new protocols. Evan faced consequences appropriate to his actions, accountability measured and fair. Daniel was cleared, his reputation intact, but the experience left him changed. He had glimpsed the seductive ease of anger and revenge, and he had chosen a different path. The cost of crossing that line had become clear, and he refused to bear it unnecessarily. At home, Mara noticed the difference immediately. Daniel was quieter, but there was a steadiness in him now, a sense of resolve tempered by experience. He explained little, shared less, but the tension that had haunted the house for weeks began to ease. The sense of betrayal, while still present in memory, no longer dominated his thoughts. Daniel had reclaimed control, not through destruction, but through careful, principled action. At night, he replayed the moments in his mind, imagining the alternate path where he had delivered the full measure of revenge. The satisfaction he had expected was there, fleeting, but so was the emptiness that would have followed. He recognized that destruction leaves space behind. It is space that can never be filled by satisfaction alone. By choosing restraint, he had preserved a sense of humanity, both in himself and in Evan. And that decision carried a quiet strength. The betrayal had changed him, shaped him, forced him to confront the darker aspects of his own nature. But it had not defined him. He had seen the possibilities of rage and destruction and had chosen a different path. That choice became a foundation, a principle he carried forward. The storm of anger was replaced with clarity. The desire for revenge replaced with discernment. The urge for immediate justice tempered by patience and reflection, even months later. Daniel found himself reflecting on the incident, considering what had been gained and what had been avoided. He realized that revenge is rarely simple. It may offer a momentary thrill, a fleeting sense of victory, but the long-term consequences are unpredictable, often painful, and sometimes corrosive. By exercising restraint, Daniel had not only preserved his own integrity but also created a space for understanding, for measured accountability, and for the possibility of repair, even if limited. He walked through his life differently now. Every interaction, every decision carried the echo of the choice he had made that day. He was more observant, more careful, more deliberate. Trust was no longer given blindly, but neither was it withheld unnecessarily. He had learned to measure intentions, to anticipate actions, and to act not out of impulse but out of principle. In the end, Daniel understood that the truest form of victory was not in destruction, but in control, integrity, and measured action. The betrayal by Evan had been devastating, but the response had been transformative. He had faced the ultimate test of character and had chosen a path that preserved his sense of self. The lessons were clear. Revenge is seductive but fleeting. Control is powerful when exercised with restraint. Justice and morality are intertwined in complex ways. And the human cost of destruction is often heavier than anticipated. Daniel carried these lessons forward, not as regrets, but as wisdom forged in the crucible of betrayal. And in that understanding, he found peace not in revenge, but in mastery over himself, over his choices, and over the consequences of his actions. He had been wronged, yes. But in the act of choosing restraint, he had reclaimed something far greater: his own moral authority, his own clarity, and his own life.